Welcome to Anthony's Outdoors. This is going to be part 2 of the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources seminar I attended while at the 2019 Musky Bash on the Chippewa Flowage. In this video, Max Wolter goes in depth into the Hayward area lakes, their musky stocking programs, and 2 different pike improvement projects and their effects on future musky populations in the Hayward area. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and be sure to check out all the other musky fishing related videos that I have up on my channel, as well as all the other outdoor content. Enjoy!
Now we're going to zoom in on this water body, and I am going to talk about a couple other water bodies in the area, just some interesting projects. With a little bit of focus on how we within the DNR work with our local Muskies Inc. chapter, and I'm going to introduce our local Muskies Inc. president, Mike Person, who is kind of the leader of the group that's behind a lot of the different things you're going to see talked about here today. We also work a lot with different guides. Pete, Steve, and recently Eric have been some of our MVPs in going out with those pit tag readers. We've loaned them out to them and getting back data on these different fish so that we have information that's going to help us manage the fishery. And you'll see how that information ties into a couple different decisions that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So this is a Chippewa Flowage fish. This is my nephew who thinks he wants to be a fish biologist, and I'm doing a very bad job discouraging him of that idea because I take him out on these really fun days and he thinks this is all I do is just have fun. There are boring days too. You'll have to learn that at some point. Someday I'm just going to make him sit and watch me do spreadsheets for 8 hours so he gets both sides of this. So, one caveat that I like to make, especially if I'm doing like a fishing clinic, is I'm not the guy who's going to help you catch the fish. That's Pete, Steve, and Eric. Okay, I'm going to talk about management, I'm going to talk about biology, I'm going to answer any questions you guys have in that world. The only fishing related thing I might be able to help you with is if you lost a matlock a couple of years ago, we found it.
Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, okay, that's what I knew would happen. Right here. And Pete already tried to do the same thing. I told Pete, this is why you write your name on your toys, buddy. I would have given it back. I think our technician Scott walked off with that one. Okay. So I'm going to go through a little bit of recent survey results. I'm going to go way more in depth on the pit tag stuff that Addie did a nice job introing and talking about that tool statewide. Then we're going to talk about pike for a little bit because there's an interesting kind of musky pike dynamic going on in a lot of our lakes in this area. And then we'll talk about musky stocking, which is like happening now, like this week basically. So, the survey stuff briefly, and because I wasn't here last year, you had Jordan last year, is that right? I'll talk a little bit about 2018. This was an interesting year. It was a later ice out, and then when it went, everything was really warm. You can see I'm in a t-shirt here. This is like 3 days after the ice went out. So we're out there netting walleye, because that's typically our first species we target is kind of walleye pike, and then we do muskies later. But we ended up catching a lot of nice muskies during that walleye survey. And the impression I got is, because of how the ice went out that year, the muskies were just ready to go. They did not want to wait any longer. Those females were bursting with eggs. We did come back and try to catch muskies later, but it was kind of tapering off already at that point. Things happened really fast. And a lot of the different species were kind of spawning on top of each other. Typically up north here, we see kind of a progression where pike go first, then walleye, and then muskies. We had it all happening at once. And this is a little story that kind of illustrates that. So this is one of the muskies we caught in our net, nice low 40s fish, I think. Kind of a big head, interesting expression almost. So we're letting this fish go, and I'm standing on the bench in our boat taking a picture of Evan. And as I turn around, there's another muskie that just comes cruising right up to our boat. And that's what happens in these late springs and when these fish are in the mood, so to speak. They're all up shallow cruising, they're looking for each other, they're looking for where they're going to spawn. They're not really behaving like they do later in the year. It's really kind of a special time to be out there just fish watching, basically. 2019, another year where we didn't even try to survey muskies because we had some other management priorities, including pike and walleye, but we do still catch some muskies. This is interesting. This is a tiger muskie, probably a 1-year-old. Remember I said all the different species were spawning on top of each other? 2018 looks like the type of year where a lot of these could be created because the pike and the muskies were basically in the same area doing the same thing at the same time. We're going to get into tagged fish quite a bit, but a lot of what we're catching now are pit tagged fish, and we know exactly when they were stocked and we know their age. So we caught 12 fish that because of their tag we know are from the 2013 year class. We tagged every one of those fish, and we caught another 12 fish that were from the 2016 year class, which you're going to hear me talk about a lot tonight. So every time we're on the water, whether we're surveying muskies directly or we're surveying other species like walleye and pike, and we just happen to be catching some muskies, we're getting more and more data that kind of feeds back into our management program and informs what we're seeing out there. So Addie talked about pit tags a little bit. This is a video of how a fish gets pit tagged. So this is at the Governor Thompson hatchery. This is a little fingerling. This is going to give Mike like flashbacks because he did this for like 8 hours on Tuesday and probably doesn't even want to see another pit tag. So he's got a hollow needle. The tag is actually inside that needle. The fish is anesthetized. Boom, tag's in the belly. Fish is ready to go. We put it back in here. So this is the recovery room with all its other cousins and brothers and sisters and whatever that have woken up. And so those fish are going to have that pit tag for the rest of their life. There's some huge, yes, Mike?
You didn't mention that every one of those gets computerized. The number goes at the computer along with the size of the fish.
Yes, yes. So while we're at the hatchery, we're reading those tags in, we're getting the length of the fish. And because they're hatchery fish, we know their birthday because we hatched them in a little jar at the hatchery. So for the rest of that fish's life, as long as it carries that tag, we are going to know exactly how old it is, exactly where it came from, the length it was stocked at, and even now we know where it was stocked at in a large flowage like this. I'll kind of end by showing you some maps of how these fish spread out. So this is really, really good information. And this is much better than what we had 20 years ago, where we'd be out in a survey, we'd catch a fish, we'd all kind of stare at it, and we'd say, okay, we think it's this old, and we think it's from this lake and didn't swim in from a different lake. We think it's natural born, or we think it's stocked. We don't think anymore, we know because of these pit tags. So the fish goes out in the lake. This is not the Chippewa flowage, it's much too clear. But it's a pretty picture. We might catch that fish as a 2-year-old. We get some data then. We might catch that fish again as a 4-year-old. That was the case for these 2 fish. And then maybe 20 years down the road, we catch that fish as a 51-incher, like the fish we got. This was on the chip a year or 2 ago. What we can do, if we catch enough of those fish, is we can start to build that growth curve like Addie showed statewide for individual lakes, or even individual year classes. And that's what this is. So this purple dashed line, that's an approximation of that statewide growth rate. And then we can kind of compare how our local fish are growing. So the yellow line is the 2013 year class in the Chippewa flowage, and these individual dots are fish. So this is a fish that we caught at 6 years old, and it was 33 inches long. And you can see all the other ones we caught at in that time span, so they were also 6-year-olds, and that helps us build that growth curve. That's going to tell us important information that you guys want to know. How long does it take them to get to 40 inches? Are they going to make it to 50 inches? It tells me a lot as a biologist about how they're growing. Have we stocked too many? That is a possibility. You stock enough, and you may override the food base, and they may not grow at the rate you want them to. Are they surviving? That's another important thing. If we just don't see them past a certain age, obviously that's very concerning. So the 2013 fish, they're doing pretty well. You can see that the average of their growth beats the statewide growth across all ages, which we like to see. One thing that's notable is there's a lot of spread. These fish are not cookie cutters. Even though they all start at a pretty similar length, about 11, 12 inches, by the time they're even 3, 4 years old, now there's a 6 to 9 inch difference between the biggest ones we see from that year class and the smallest ones. And as time goes on, some of that spread is due to the ones being females growing faster and the ones being males growing slower, which is basically a truism of all fish species that we manage. Males are almost always growing slower. This 2016 year class is one that we're going to be watching really closely. This is one where the Muskies Inc. chapter, Mike's group, came in. They donated some extra money so that we could buy a really high quality food to finish these fish on at the hatchery and get them up to a bigger size. And the indications are that they've had really good survival so far. They had a nice head start. It gets them around some of the predators, gives them more fat reserves to make it through that first winter, which is kind of a critical bottleneck for stocked fish. And here they go. They were around 15 the year after they were stocked, high teens as 2-year-olds. And this last spring, we saw them anywhere from 21 to almost 30 inches as 3-year-olds. So as 4-year-olds, we'll probably start to see some of them crossing that 30-inch range. But we don't know yet because they haven't been out there for 4 full years.
Max, would you feel that that's why those 2 classes are exceeding what the state averages due to what the club has done to help grow these fish a little bit bigger in the hatchery?
Yeah, we love that head start. This is also an A1 lake, so we expect a little better growth and a little better overall size potential here than if we'd say stock them in Island Lake, which is 50 acres down by Winter. That's where we'd probably see something tailing a little below this statewide growth rate. Because remember, that statewide rate, I mean, that's an average of our biggest lakes and our smallest lakes, and we have a lot of small lakes. But this is going to be really interesting to track over time. More stuff coming up on pit tags later. So now I'm actually going to switch gears and talk about pike, because this is kind of a cool project. Musky anglers have found this to be pretty interesting. Pike are not native to most of the lakes in the Hayward area. A lot of people don't know that. Neither are crappies, actually. Yeah. But this was an area where muskies were the only socket in the Chippewa flowage, and in this portion of the Chippewa River before the flowage was here, and Lacuta, Grindstone, Round Lake, Teal Lake, Lost Land, Spider, Blaisdell, well, how many am I missing here? Ghost, Lower Clam, virtually all these lakes had no northern pike. In the 1900s, at various points, northern pike started getting into these different lakes. And we don't have an exact paper trail on how that happened. Everybody likes to blame the DNR. It's really fun. It's really easy. The story that I have heard on every single lake is that the hatchery driver was drunk, and he was supposed to stock muskies, but he ended up going to the pike pond in a drunken stupor and taking those fish and dumping them in the lake. Now, if that was the reason that all these lakes got pike, we either had an absolute soak of a hatchery driver for about 70 years, or there's some other, less nefarious explanations, like anglers, who didn't know better, introduced them to a lake. We have a lot of connected water. Once they're in one place, they can swim to others. In the case of the Chippewa flowage in specific, the hypothesis is that they were stocked into Bear Lake, which is way up on the East Fork, and they slowly made their way down. And that was obviously a mistake that we would like to get back if we could. Some of the introductions happened around the 1930s, 1940s. Some of them are more recent. If you look at Spider and Tiger Cat, they've only had pike since the 90s. But it's something we have to deal with now, and we have seen changes in our muskie populations. So, to try and have less abundant pike and try and maintain some of our muskie populations in their historic status, we've engaged in several different control methods for pike. And I call it control because we're never going to get rid of pike. That's going back to that status where we just have muskies and not pike. It's not a realistic goal. It basically can't be done. Pike are a very sticky species. Once they get somewhere, they reproduce very effectively. They use the habitat really well. We're always going to have pike. So we just need to manage for them effectively. We're going to talk a lot about a DNR-led pike program on LCO. We just wrapped up an angler-led initiative here on the Chippewa flowage, which is what this flyer is all about. For the whole summer, there was a red thing at the bar right here at Treelands and a bunch of other resorts. If you harvested a pike, you threw it in for a raffle, and we tried to incentivize more pike harvest that way. And there's some other loosely organized programs on some of these other musky lakes that have pike now.
How many did they end up pulling?
7,486 was the official count. Yeah, it's actually only about 3/4 of the way to our goal. Yeah. Anyhow, so I'm going to show you a video here. We're going to go to LCO. This is the somewhat now ironically named Musky Bay on LCO. This is like Musky Mecca from a biology standpoint. This portion of Lacuta is where some of the biggest muskies ever recorded on Earth spawned. And this is where our hatchery historically was able to go in and get muskies very easily. Back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even through the 60s. What they're scooping out of this net is hundreds and hundreds of northern pike and no muskies. And that's common now. We estimate that there are over 8,000 pike in LCO and probably less than 200 muskies. Wow. A lake that historically had quite a few. And so this is us in the spring. We're out there, we're setting those spike nets that Eddie talked about. We basically sock them right into there as soon as the ice comes out, and the pike just swarm into these nets. We're taking them to shore. We've got kind of a workup station here. There's Mike Person, our Muskies Inc. He's gone. Okay. Muskies Inc. president again. They were very active in this, as were the LCO Tribe, the Lake Association, a few other groups came together. What we're doing here is we are taking these pike out of LCO. This is not something we do everywhere because it is very expensive. It is very challenging to get enough to actually move the needle. But this was a pretty unique situation, and I'll kind of illustrate that more after the video here. hundreds and hundreds of pike every day. Very, very few muskies. So, this is what I wanted to wait for. So this is the cool aerial drone shot. So this is Musky Bay, the ice is out. The rest of the lake, still completely frozen. As soon as Musky Bay opens, all the pike know it and they go in there. That makes them very susceptible to our netting. So we can actually catch a huge portion of the population for removal. And that's what we did. We took out 3,000 of the 8,000 pike in Couturier in 1 year. That's about 1 out of every 3 pike. We sensed there would be some PR blowback if we were just killing the big pike, the ones that people actually can get excited about. So instead of doing that, we moved them to the Couturier River, which is the outflow of the Couturier Lake system, but they can't get back into the lake because of the dam. And we were very open with everybody about what we were doing. We said, hey, if you want to go catch these big pike, go check out the Couturier. They're still there, people can still enjoy them. The small ones, we didn't have as much of a use for them, and there was lots and lots of them. So our Muskies Inc. chapter, again, came up with some funds to have them sent to a wild game processor. We turned them into fish patties, and we had them donated to local food shelves. I might have a picture of it later on. So that's a great use of a resource that nobody really wants, because we had so many of these snaky pike, to the point where anglers weren't even really that interested in them. Ignore this bottom portion for now, and let's look at the top. This is what the pike population looked like in LCO before we started this project. The average length of pike was about 20 inches. Only 1% of the pike were over 28 inches. So the ones that you guys might actually be okay with catching just weren't there. There was a lot of snakes that nobody really wanted. After we removed about 1/3 of them, we came back the next year, we netted again, and we saw a really big change in the population. The average length went up to almost 24 inches, which is a really nice response. Now we had 85% over 21 inches instead of majority under. So we were really, really pleased with this. Now, there's a tie-in here to muskies too, right? We weren't doing this just to benefit the pike. We also wanted to have more room in the fishery for muskies. So what we did is the first year we took out a bunch of pike, we stocked a bunch of muskies. Pretty simple plan, really. You take a bunch of pike biomass out, you put a bunch of muskie biomass in, and you hope that the muskies get a better shot because there's less predators out there. We had been stocking muskies in LCO for decades, and we didn't have a lot to show for it. The population was kind of continually declining, and we hadn't really had any success reversing that trend. This effort, and again, our Muskies Inc. chapter was heavily involved in this. They've got these fish even bigger. That's Mike again, stocking the fish. There's a lot of reason to be hopeful. The very next spring, we were actually seeing little muskies all around the lake, which we had not seen since in over 20 years, stocked or natural born. This fall, there they are. They're making it. Some of them are getting up to about 26, 28 inches now. So there's some really good early indicators that this strategy of taking out these very abundant pike, replacing the stocked muskies, has some merit. This is one that might resonate with you guys as anglers. So this is the number of muskies caught out of LCO in our local Muskies Inc. tournament, which is about 400 to 500 anglers. If you look at it by decade here, from the mid-80s to the mid-90s, there was like close to 100 caught. All right, things were still pretty good. And then by decade, that just drops right off. And there haven't been any caught out of LCO for the last, I think, 7 years now.
2 years ago, Dennis Merrickville caught one.
Way to go, Dennis. You got one. So obviously we want to reverse this trend because, I mean, how sad is this that we have a 5,000 acre lake, one of these big lakes that has this incredible pedigree of having produced 2 world records, some of the biggest muskies ever seen in inland Wisconsin, not just historically, but also in the 21st century. We've gotten 55 and 56 inch muskies in the years 2000 and beyond. If you're ever at the Spooner Hatchery in the Visitor Center, there is a picture there of hatchery crews in Musky Bay holding what is reported to be a 68-inch long muskie. How long is the Louis Spray fish, Pete? 63? 63. 5 inches longer than the Louis Spray record. So if you're ever there, check it out. It is an incredible picture. The fish looks every bit of 68 inches. So obviously we're not ready to give up on this lake. And that's why we're doing a lot of these more extreme measures than what we do in other water bodies. And we're really pleased that all summer we're finally getting pictures from LCO again. They're young fish, they're small fish, but they're there. And we haven't had them there for quite some time. So how does that translate to this lake? Well, again, We did that on LCO. That was a netting effort. It was a DNR-led effort. We can do that because of how those pike concentrate in Musky Bay. In a lake like this, where it's 15,000 acres and there are literally 1,000 places that pike can spawn, my team cannot go out there and get them with the nets. It's just a logistic impossibility. But there are so many anglers out here fishing that love this water body that we knew that we had a chance to do this type of a removal and control effort with just angler caught fish if we could get people on board with keeping them. Our creel surveys estimate there's 32,000 pike caught every year. A tiny fraction of those are actually kept. If we could get people to keep the fish that are already in their hands, in the boat, we might be able to have a positive response that could lead to bigger pike, and it could lead to more room in the fishery for muskies. So that's what we tried to do here in 2019. A bunch of groups came to the table, Muskies Inc. again, and we said, hey, let's see if we can get 10,000 pike harvested by anglers. So we set up a raffle system that I mentioned earlier. Every pike you harvested, you qualified for a ticket. There's like $1,000 cash prize. Did anybody harvest pike and turn in tickets this summer? All right.
We got over 50 of them last July.
Nice. Awesome. All right, good deal. So, got some participants
So why,
right
if
here.
we're trying to remove them though, could they not be killed? I mean, they were killed,
Yeah.
but we were supposed to eat them, and you get 50 fish, we were filleting little
Yeah. Yeah.
guys that.
Yeah. So, we want them gone, but we don't want to violate what are considered wanton waste laws in Wisconsin. And you could see how that could very easily be problematic once that genie was out of the bottle. So for pike, yeah, we said keep them please, but you got to harvest them. We don't want people ripping out gills and throwing them up on bars, because maybe that's pike, and maybe everybody's okay with that. But what if somebody decides I don't like muskies, and they're doing that? So that's why we have that law in the books that you can't just kill them for fun and leave them on bars or throw them out or something like that. Does that make sense?
It
Okay. Yeah. So we had people that took part in that. Some were pretty excited. These folks, you did your job. What was your name?
Andy.
Andy, last name?
Bramstead.
I entered every one of the tickets, so I remember a lot of these names. So this family, they did really well.
We didn't win, by the way.
You didn't win? I'm sorry.
Apparently not.
You're all winners in my eyes. We had over 1,800 people that participated from 29 different states. That's kind of cool to see how everybody kind of comes to this flowage from all over the country. The top angler had 110 pike. He was the father of one of the resort owners, and he was basically going out every morning, just kind of a retired guy, catching 5 pike, bringing it back to the resort, and having a fish fry for whoever was there every day. So he did quite well. If we had 100 gyms, we would have hit our goal, but we don't. We did not quite make it, so you got to have like the thermometer thing anytime you do something like this. We hit 74% roughly of where we wanted to get to. That goal of hitting 10,000, some back of the envelope calculations that we did based on how many pike we thought were out here and how many we thought would need to be removed before we'd start to see a difference both in the pike and the muskies. What we did like is it actually encouraged people to keep much smaller pike than they usually did. You guys sound like you were right there with us. Typically what happens in these pike populations in the lakes in our area is people will harvest some, but they're only going to take the big ones. They'll only take 23, 24, 25 plus, right? They're throwing all the snaky ones back, and that actually exacerbates that problem. It means the snaky ones stay out there, the big ones are always gone. So you never have a population that gets any better size. I'm excited about this. Made a bunch more food for the food shelves. These are fish donated at some of the tournaments, and we had volunteers there cleaning pike all day, donated to Sawyer County Food Bank, places like that. This kind of shows you when things went right for us and where things fell apart. So this is all the different weeks that the project was going. Excuse me. The blue line is kind of the pace we would need to be on to hit 10,000, like right at the end of the project. The orange line is what we actually did. So ice fishing was pretty rough. It was a tough year for getting around on the ice. We were still advertising. Not a lot of people knew about this project. We kicked butt in May and June, and we actually caught back up with our pace. And then we got into some of those hot July, August times where the pike are just harder to catch, and we weren't able to finish at our same pace. So, will this make a difference? I will be able to tell you more next year. But it's kind of an interesting project that I wanted to talk about.
You plan on doing that again, or is that
No,
still?
not until we've had a chance to step back and evaluate it and see, like, did we get what we wanted out of this before we go to all that effort again. As we were chopping up a lot of these pike, it gave us a chance to look at what they were eating. So this is of mild interest. Lots of bluegill. fair numbers of perch, a bunch of gooey fish that we can't identify. It's just a fish booger. Addie has seen enough fish stomachs to know that fish boogers are a big part of what you get. Insects, especially larger dragonflies, crappies, and then a bunch of other stuff that includes mud minnows, darters, crayfish, shiners, creek chubs, leeches, log perch, other pike. They're very cannibalistic. Trout perch. Anybody know what a trout perch is? These are a bunch of things that you wouldn't even know are out in this lake unless you start looking inside the other fish. They do eat some walleye. We found a fair number of walleye actually later in the season, and warmouth. So, the interesting thing from a muskie fishing standpoint on this lake is look at what's not on this list. Because pike and muskie are eating a lot of the same food. Suckers, didn't see a single sucker. You know, and there'd be small suckers out there that pike could eat on a lot of lakes, but this lake does not have the sucker population it used to have. The other thing that's not on here is ciscos. Addie mentioned ciscos being great for growing big muskies. Ciscos grow the big muskies in LCO, Round Lake, if you've heard anything about that lake, Grindstone, Whitefish. A lot of our big producers have that cold water, really fatty prey base. Chippewa doesn't have that. So most of what they're eating out here is probably panfish. This is a fish we shocked a couple weeks ago. It looks very uncomfortable when you eat a bunch of bluegill. Look at how that belly is just like, you can see different humps from different panfish in there. And you kind of feel it, and that's no question about what's in there. And so that might be something that you guys can, piece of information that would actually help you catch some fish. That's a lot of times what they're keying in on is these schools of panfish. So we'll end by talking about stocking. And a lot of this information is super fresh. So when we stock the Chippewa flowage, we're stocking it with eggs that we get from the Chippewa flowage. So our team was out here from the hatchery this spring. They catch enough males and females, they pair them together, they squirt all the stuff together in jars to fertilize it, they bring it back to the hatchery, raise it up there. Those fish get stocked all throughout the upper Chippewa Basin, but a number of them come right back to here. I made an interesting decision putting a picture of a big tiger muskie on this, because obviously we didn't get any eggs from that one. But it's a cool picture, right? That's what one of the fish our hatchery crew was proud to show off. This year the plan was to stock 5,000 extended growth muskies. Our Muskies Inc. crew again came to the table with money to pay for more minnows to try and push them and get that size a little bigger to get better survival. That's mentioned here. And they're basically stocked like this week. One of the loads went in at Deerfoot earlier today. There's a load going in at Crane Lake tomorrow. On Wednesday we stocked at Tiger Muskie, Deer Run, and Sheep Lake, and CC South. So,
How many, Max?
5,000.
It was 5,000?
Yes.
Every time?
No, yeah, gotcha. So this map's really cool, and I will walk you through what you're looking at here. This is half the Chippewa flowage, and I kind of break it down so you can get a little more detail.
That's the west side, we can't get there, there's a bog.
Yes,
Yeah, no.
This is the forbidden zone this week, which is too bad, because I was actually going to show you where a bunch of muskies are. These stars are the 3 stocking locations we used in 2016, and when we stocked those fish, we paired the pit tag number to the location they were stocked at. So every time we catch that fish in the future, we'll know the ramp it was put in on. And that's what you see on this map. Every one of these circles, the color of the circle, every one of these circles is a muskie. The color of the circle corresponds to where it was stocked out at. Okay? So all these red circles here, those are our CC North fish. They really like this area. These black squigglies are our electrofishing routes. And I put those on there because it helps you understand why you see so many circles in some areas and none in others. It's not that there's no muskies over here, we just haven't been there to look for them, okay? So, but you can see anywhere we are shocking, we're turning up a lot of these stock 2016 fish. There is some, spread out of here, so CC North, even within a year, some of them were down in Milwaukee Bay, we got one down by Tiger Muskie. The CC South fish are kind of spreading out through Scott Lake. Here's one down in James Slough, one out by Eagle Island. This fish was stocked right there at Treelands, went all the way around under the bridge and decided it wanted to come hang out in Durazio Bay with all the fish stocked in CC North. We wouldn't know they do these things if we didn't pit tag. We still don't know why, but at least we know that they are doing it. We can look at the east side. Here you can see most of the fish that we've recovered from that Treelands location. Many of these were caught by Pete, fishing right outside Treelands, trying to help his stats there.
Thanks.
Basically following the hatchery truck and throwing a little MEPS or something, right? We haven't seen any of those south of the Narrows yet. Keep in mind they've only been out there for 3 years. Part of that is probably because there's so much good habitat for young muskies up in this portion of the lake where we're at right now. I imagine as they hit adulthood, they're going to be looking for more of their own space, and we'll start to see more of them bleed down here. Got a couple from CC South and North that have crossed under the bridge, and we're hanging out in Kindergarten Bay. So, this is the type of information that's going to help us stock smarter in the future. These are stocking locations we've used the last 3 times we've stocked. So this is 2013, we used Treeland, CC South, and Indian Trail. 2016, the fish we were just looking at, Treeland, CC North, and CC South. So what you see here is a lot of focus on kind of the middle part of the lake. And that was always by design. We just assumed if you put them in the middle of the lake, they're going to spread out, right? Well, what we're seeing is, a lot of them are staying fairly close to where they're stocked. So there might be kind of a, high concentration of muskies in those areas already. So we used this information to come up with these stocking locations for 2016 that spread us out into some more of the extremities of the lake. So there's our Deer Run, Deer Foot, which was earlier today, Indian Trail, Chief Lake, and then Crane Lake. So hopefully those fish are going to be getting into areas where there aren't a lot of muskies. They can set up their own little home range, hopefully find lots of food and less pike, and get off to a really nice start so that you guys can catch them when you come to this event 7 or 8 years from now, when they're at a size that you guys would actually care about. 6-year-old fish right now in the Chippewa flowage are the ones that are kind of in the mid-30s. If you look closely at the charts and squint a little bit, you'll probably start to pick out some of these stocked year classes showing up in the fishery. So we feel good about it. We work with our local Muskies Inc. chapter a ton, as you can see. They are, would you be insulted if I called you a slush fund for me? Okay. Whenever I need something that's not in my budget, Mike gets an email and we make things happen. It's a really nice relationship. They're very cooperative, very open-minded. So if you work with a local club, I encourage you to develop a similar relationship with your biologist. So I will leave you with the elusive unicorn muskie that we caught. Just odd deformity. But if you don't believe it's the unicorn muskie, I can jazz it up a little bit.